Brandon Aiyuk, 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, who has been sort of in the news this whole offseason, has requested trades and then rescinded trade requests, and sometimes he wants to go and sometimes that. We've talked about Brandon Aiyuk a million times, but today, officially, NFL Network's Mike Garafolo reported that Aiyuk has requested a trade. So Aiyuk has requested a trade, and also Josina Anderson has reported that the Patriots have been involved in trade requests for Brandon Aiyuk. So Patriots have called. Aiyuk wants to be out. Taylor, overall 30,000-foot view, what do you make of this news? And should the Patriots go after Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, so one, let me put the numbers up here just so we have something to kind of go off of, because Brandon Aiyuk, I know there's been some debate over whether he's worthy of some kind of big money deal. Some contracts you kind of think of in terms of trades, and then guys signed to big deals were like Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown when he was moved on from the Titans. But Brandon Aiyuk is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Like, he doesn't really have any weaknesses. If you look on Matt Harmon's perception reception, he does a great job over there. Yeah. Basically, you can run literally every route in the route tree. Like, the entire thing was green, looked like a damn Christmas tree. It's beautiful. He's a really good receiver, and this is considering he's on an offense with a ton of other options as well, and he's been able to be highly productive. You're talking George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo, obviously, but of that group, Brandon Aiyuk is the best route runner, one of the best route runners in the NFL, period. So there's plenty of arguments to be made. He's also only 26 years old.
Yep.
So if you want a guaranteed, all-pro caliber talent at wide receiver, then yeah, I think you go after Brandon Aiyuk, especially considering this Patriots offense is pretty young when you look at what their long-term outlook is at a lot of these offensive spots, especially the skill positions. Like, you got Drake May, then Javon Baker, Pop Douglas, and Jalen Polk are really who you think come to the top receivers are going to be at this point. And then obviously Hunter Henry's in long-term, but you'd hope that like a Jaheim Bell can kind of rise to prominence there as well.
Yeah.
If you get a Brandon Aiyuk, it's not a whole lot of projection. Like, you can speed up Drake May's development because he has that true elite number one where he can look to that guy in all those one-on-one matchups and know that he's going to win. And it kind of speeds up your playoff hopes as well, because now it's not just about Drake May. You kind of have somebody who takes some of the burden off him whenever he enters the lineup. Now, this is where things start to get a little more murky. One, Mike Garofalo made a very good point. The 49ers are no strangers to these situations where players want out. I know Deebo Samuel's been in this category. Robbie Gould's been in this category as well. These guys are like, no, I want to be traded. I'm not happy. The 49ers do not budge. They are very, very tough to try to get off of their spot when it comes to that. So one, it's not even that realistic that he gets moved at all. All right, Aiyuk doesn't even have any leverage. He's on a fifth-year option, and then the 49ers can franchise tag him in his sixth season. They have all the control. So if you want to talk about prospective deals, you could look at, again, A.J. Brown, who was dealt for an 18th overall pick and the 101st overall picks. Or if the 49ers say, you know what, I want a king's ransom, then you look at maybe the Tyreek Hill deal before he got his mega contract. He was acquired for a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and then future fourth and sixth-round picks. Now, it's going to be different with the Patriots. This is a team that could end up picking inside like the top 10, top 15, almost guaranteed it feels like top 15, but even top 5, you really have no idea. So where my head went was, okay, it's kind of that like mystery box. Do you want this thing where you know exactly what you're going to get, or do you want to go through the gamble that is the NFL draft? Well, let's look at some of the first-round receivers from the past few years. You got classes where it's like, yeah, you got your Henry Ruggses and your Jerry Judys, but in Brandon Aiyuk's class, they also had CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Again, all pro talent. You look at the next year, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Darius Toney obviously is what he is. Rashad Bateman hasn't really lived up to expectations. But again, these are 3 all-pro caliber players, at the very worst Pro Bowl caliber players.
Yep.
2022, a lot of guys who just went to bad situations, unfortunately. Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all guys who have balled out. Very good receivers. They just haven't had very good quarterback play.
Garrett Wilson might be my favorite young player in the NFL. Like, that guy's awesome. He just hasn't been able to put it together with like Aaron Rodgers is here, for example. I'm sorry to cut you off going on your rant, but like that kid's nasty. So we shouldn't even say he's in a bad situation, but he's one of the best players in football.
100%. And then like Jahan Dotson, you're hoping that maybe he gets more production and can really kind of steady his career out with Jaden Daniels. Treylon Burks, it feels like the Titans still don't really know how to use him. That's a weird situation. Then moving on, 2023 was kind of a weird year for the receiver position, but still, Jackson Smith and the Jigba, Quentin Johnston, one of those misses, but Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, two excellent young players. And then obviously this year, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. If the Patriots could get anybody of that caliber, again, with one of those top 10 picks, this offense is looking a lot more loaded than it does right now. Even Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Xavier Legette, guys who give you a lot of explosiveness. So I say all of that to say, if you want to talk about getting a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, you're also taking the chance on potentially missing out at a guy who's going to be cost controlled right within your range with probably one of maybe two picks you'd have to give up for Brandon Aiyuk on top of having to pay him. So yeah, I like the idea of having a guaranteed guy who you can.
Sorry,
my did something. But like a guaranteed baller like Brandon Aiyuk, who it's like, yes, this is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, but you already have Drake May on a rookie contract and you take on the money. But if you end up with a top 10 or 15 pick, you can get a guy of that similar caliber anyway, and then you don't have to pay him all that money, which, I wouldn't start pinching pennies necessarily because you do have Drake May. But I don't know. I'd rather keep the draft capital if you want to be this draft and develop team and you want to build through the draft and all these things that they were saying. I appreciate that they've been in pursuit of Brandon Aiyuk and tried to see what the situation is. But I also wouldn't just give up whatever the 49ers want just to get him in the building.
Man, I continue to go back and forth on this. And from this show that I've been team go get Brandon Aiyuk the whole time, just because I think that, having Drake May's development and, how important it is for him to come in here and, truly be the next franchise quarterback. You need to do everything you possibly can to make that happen. And that goes from not throwing him into the fire as fast as you want to, and maybe trying to, kind of pulling him back a little bit and making sure that he's 100% ready to play. And that also includes surrounding him with top tier talent, not only at the wide receiver position, but also on the offensive line. And so a guy like Brandon Aiyuk is proven. These guys who are in 2025's wide receiver class, they might be cheap for 4 years, but they're not proven yet. Brandon Aiyuk is one of the best wide receivers in football. He can be that true alpha number 1 player. So there were people in my mentions today saying he wasn't that. I found that absolutely laughable. He is a stud. And so I understand.
Chris, I feel like there's not a lot of people watching specifically Aiyuk. They watch the 49ers, but if you watch Aiyuk, I feel like your eyes will be opened.
Definitely. You see Aiyuk and Kittle and Samuel and McCaffrey, and you see all those guys, and it's like, oh, he's just a product of that whole system. It's like, no, he's just another great addition to that system. The kid's a stud. And so I understand, yes, you have to trade all of this capital, and then you have to put resources in to actually pay him. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be worth it. So yeah, players cost money, but you have to, pay good players good money. So I do understand the other side of it, where if you look at all the wide receivers, there is a good hit rate over the last 5 years. Wide receiver has become a very deep position. Alex Barth talks about this, about how with the running back position and all the running backs are kind of the same, and that's why it gets devalued. Barth continues to wonder if that's going to end up happening with wide receiver, because there are so many, you can just wait on them. This is kind of the perfect example of that, where do you go get Aiyuk, or do you just wait for this next class because you can hit on it? And then say you hit next year on a quote unquote true wide receiver 1, and you also hit on Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, then you have a really, really good wide receiver core around these guys.
Kayshon Boutte?
Kayshon Boutte too. We'll see what happens. We'll touch on him in a second when we get through our Patriots news.
Another one there still is also the wide receiver market in terms of guys that might be available next offseason, like T. Higgins. We know he's probably going to play on the franchise tag, and I think they're going to franchise tag him again, try to get something in terms of trade value, but you're probably not going to get more than like a 3rd round pick, because everybody knows that you're not serious about retaining him. So T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, I don't know what the Cowboys are doing, but it's starting to seem like he could actually hit the market, which you don't really see with guys of his caliber. But that's another guy who's in that upper echelon, like really top tier wide receivers. If you want maybe more of a short-term guy who is a difference maker, but is kind of towards the end of his career while, Drake May still figuring things out, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Stephon Diggs is trying to have a career year right now, so he can earn himself one final deal. So, Aiyuk, I think, is in a different category than all of those guys. I don't want to lump them in together, but there will also probably be some good wide receivers available next offseason on top of the draft. So, more so kind of case against getting Aiyuk, although again, he's such a good player. I'm not mad. I think if I had a way to do it, by all means. But if we're talking like a 1st round pick, again, a potential top 10, 15 pick, and then you're probably also going to have to give up like a 3rd or a 4th, I don't know.
It's definitely steep
until I'm proven otherwise. But I mean, I trust your front office and your coaching staff. Do what you've been saying you were going to do.
Right. It's something to keep an eye on, though, as we mentioned, as Josina Anderson reported, the Patriots were involved. So we'll keep an eye on it as the weeks continue on. You mentioned the staff, Taylor. So let's get into one other piece of Patriots news where there was a little bit of a front office shuffle this morning as the Patriots announced some changes and basically some title changes to their front office, where Matt Groh is now the director of player personnel. Alonzo Highsmith, who came over from, I believe, Green Bay, or Cleveland. I think he worked in both places at one point with this Eliot Wolf front office kind of crew. He comes over. He is now listed as a senior personnel executive. And the big one is Patrick Stewart. He is now the director of pro personnel, taking over for Steve Cargile, who left to go to the Texans. So some important roles and titles being put in place. Titles, something that Gerard Mayo says the new era of Patriots, actually put some weight behind. So important to see these guys sort of get into their place, because when Eliot Wolf was sort of moved to GM, but he was keeping his director of scouting title, like it kind of got murky there for a second. We didn't really know who was doing what, but now before the season, week before training camp, these seem to get ironed out. So thoughts quickly on just the Patriots sending out this release today and giving their front office guys official titles.
Yeah, nothing really new with Alonzo Highsmith. It's really just we know what his title is, but he was one of my favorite people who was added to the fold. He and Eliot Wolf have been like thick as thieves for years. They came up together. So there's a lot of trust there. He also spent a couple seasons at Miami, and they had like back-to-back, I think, the top 10 recruiting classes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was like the general manager of the University of Miami football for the last few years. That's right.
Yeah, like this is a guy who's proven at multiple levels at respected organizations. Obviously, Miami, all the history they have in college football, and then in the NFL with the Browns. Didn't have as much success as you'd like to see, but still, in terms of player acquisition, they weren't really hurting or anything. It's just the QB play has been so bad. And then obviously Green Bay and coming up through that system, says a lot on its own. Then Patrick Stewart was someone who we knew was very involved in the scouting process. I feel like it was involved with the quarterbacks as well. You'd always hear that Patrick Stewart, whenever it wasn't the entire contingent of like Eliot Wolf and Gerard Mayo, I think they sent him on some individual assignments. So writing was kind of on the wall there with Steve Cargile now reuniting with Nick Caserio in Houston. Just good for him. None of this is really surprising, but now we actually have things official. And two other notes, Troy Brown and Joe Kim were not listed in the announcement, but Mike Reese clarified that is because they're in skills development. So I don't think they're actually listed in that capacity, but they are still going to be on the coaching staff.
Yeah, Patriots, again, additionally, on top of the front office announcement, officially put out their list of their full coaching staff, announced 29 coaches, Taylor. So a massive coaching staff compared to what Bill Belichick used to hold here. And yeah, like you said, Troy Brown, Joe Kim, still involved, still heavily involved in the team, but they are, again, in the skills development department, not technically coaches. So one more piece of Patriots news before we get into our mailbag, Taylor, is Kayshon Boutte. We did a full video on Kayshon Boutte, so make sure to keep your eyes on the Patriots Press Pass channel, and we did that live from Foxboro today, so you can check that out. But just quickly, for live listeners who haven't seen or want to get our quick thoughts on it, the former LSU wide receiver had his charges dropped by the state of Louisiana today. If you remember earlier in the offseason, he was charged with online gambling underage, I believe, and then also computer fraud, which was all tied together. He was arrested down in Baton Rouge at one point this offseason, but apparently those charges were now dropped today by the state of Louisiana. So he is basically all clear. Mike Reese added to this a little bit that the NFL is still sort of investigating it, but as of now, Boutte is allowed to participate in all team activities. So again, if the charges are dropped, it looks like steer clearing for Kayshon Boutte. So a guy who was at one point a first round talent, fell to the 6th round last season for a variety of reasons. Patriots bring him in, had a strong camp, fell off a little bit, obviously gets into some trouble this offseason, but now seems to be clear, head clear, crystal clear heading into training camp, coming off of as well a good offseason program. So just quick thoughts on that, Taylor, before we get into the mailbag.
I just hope he capitalizes on this opportunity, man.
Yeah.
Like he got these other young guys. Clearly he's not one of the more prominent members of their plan, but as we saw, that talent is still there. We saw it last summer where it was kind of around this time, particularly in training camp, where it felt like every day he was making some crazy kind of play. but the consistency wasn't there. And I think that was a big reason he didn't see the field last season, despite the Patriots kind of desperately needing people to step up for that wide receiver core. There's not a whole lot we can add because we've discussed he had that really strong day where he's making contested catches, especially near the sideline, which is an area where he struggled in that obviously season opener. Yeah, I was thinking of TV. But we saw, again, he's got to put it together and be able to adjust to the pro game and obviously adjust to a brand new offense as well. But, I mean, Jacoby Brissett's new, Drake May's new. Everybody's got to start to earn some kind of rapport and some playing time. And considering that X spot, the whole reason he got his opportunity was because Tyquan Thornton was MIA. Jalen Reagor wasn't really doing anything too impressive, but really it was him who stood out at that outside boundary position, taking advantage of one-on-one matchups. So I really hope he can be another young guy that you can start looking forward to watching develop in this offense, because if the young talent does pay off, then I think that the perception of this receiving core will look very different in the near future, especially with a guy like Drake May who can access the entire field and make all these guys better. But, at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to him because we know he can be a really good player, but he's got to put the work in like a Jalen Polk. We've seen like how maniacal he is, like a Javon Baker, and just seize the opportunity.
Yeah, this is a very fluid wide receiver room right now, Taylor. Obviously, we're talking Aiyuk trade today. We're talking Boutte getting off on his charges, coming off of a solid offseason program. 2 rookies in Polk and Baker who were, expected to make the team, obviously. And then KJ Osborne is a guy who you bring in this offseason. Then you draft 2 guys. And you obviously have Juju and Tyquan, guys who are sort of on that roster bubble that could easily make the team and could easily get cut. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks as we get through training camp in the season. So we'll obviously have you covered there again on Patriots Press Pass the whole time.
I got to tell you about our good friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Make sure to subscribe to Patriots Press Pass for all your Patriots news and updates on YouTube. And for all our written work, make sure you check out clnsmedia.com.